You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's top stories. France declares 3 days of national mourning after at least 84 people killed when a driver in a truck plowed through a busy street in Nice after Bastille Day celebrations. Neighbors of the 31-year-old Tunisian Frenchman suspected to have killed the people in Nice described him as a loner with no visible religious affiliation. And in Lebanon, the cabinet agrees to form a ministerial committee to address the environmental disaster afflicting the Litani River that threatens surrounding residents and their livelihoods. Video and images uploaded to social media purport to show people fleeing after a gunman at the wheel of a heavy truck plowed into crowds celebrating Bastille Day in the French city of Nice, killing at least 84 people, among them about 20 children, and injuring over 100. One social media user who uploaded a video of people, including families with children, running through the street near restaurants, told Reuters that they feel the pain of these families who lost loved ones and pray they find peace and that the world would never see such tragic events. According to one city official, the truck careered on for up to 2 kilometers. Several children were among the dead. Other videos purport to show people fleeing by foot and on bicycles and police in the street. A still image also uploaded on social media is said to show casualties on the street after the attack, which President François Hollande has labeled a terrorist act. Neighbors of the man suspected to have been driving the truck and to have plowed through the streets of Nice describe him as a loner with no visible religious affiliation as forensic experts are searching his flat. AFP are reporting that they interviewed about a dozen neighbors of the man whose name is 31-year-old Franco-Tunisian Mohamed Lahouaj Bouhlel, whose identity papers were found in the truck as well. They portray him as a solitary figure who rarely spoke and did not even return greetings when their paths crossed in the 4-story block located in a working-class neighborhood of Nice. Sebastian, one neighbor who spoke on condition that his full name was not used, said Lahouaj Bouhlel did not seem overtly religious, often dressed in shorts and sometimes wore work boots. Police investigators and forensic experts entered his apartment around 9:30 a.m. this morning with an armed police intervention unit in support and brought out bags of material later. France is declaring 3 days of national mourning starting Saturday. Prime Minister Manuel Valls said France had entered a new era and will now have to live with a terrorist threat after the gunman at the wheel of the heavy truck plowed into crowds celebrating Bastille Day in the French city of Nice, killing over 84. He was quoted as saying, "We want to say to the people of France, and with a lot of force, we will not give in. France will not give in to the terrorist threats," adding that the country must now be united and show composure together. And reactions from across Europe. UK Prime Minister Theresa May said Britain stood shoulder to shoulder with France after the Nice attack and was reviewing whether the UK needed to do more to boost its own security. May, who took over as Prime Minister on Wednesday with the job of steering Britain out of the European Union, said her Deputy National Security Advisor would share the review.
Horrifying attack in Nice last night. Our hearts go out to the French people and to all those who've lost loved ones or been injured. While the full picture is still emerging, it seems that at least 80 people are feared dead and many others have been injured. These were innocent victims enjoying a national celebration with their friends and families. We are working urgently to establish whether any British nationals were caught up in the attack. Our ambassador is travelling to Nice today with consular staff, and they will be doing all they can to help anyone affected. I've asked my Deputy National Security Advisor to chair a COBRA meeting of senior officials to review what we know and what we can do to help. And I will speak to President Hollande today and make clear that the United Kingdom stands shoulder to shoulder with France today, as we have done so often in the past. If, as we fear, this was a terrorist attack, then we must redouble our efforts to defeat these brutal murderers who want to destroy our way of life. We must work with France and our partners around the world to stand up for our values and for our freedom. The threat level here in the United Kingdom is already at severe. that means that a terrorist attack is highly likely. Senior officials today will be reviewing what more we can do to ascertain whether there is any further action we need to take. But our security services and our police are ever vigilant, and as I say, the threat level here is already at a level that says that a terrorist attack is highly likely.
In Lebanon, the cabinet agreed to form a ministerial committee to address the environmental calamity affecting the Litani River that is threatening surrounding residents and their livelihoods. If there are no measures to tackle the Litani River issue, there will be a disaster for irrigation, surface and groundwater resources, according to Agriculture Minister Akram Shayib. He said this before entering the session and also added that it will also affect human health. The Litani River is a major source of fresh water for local farmers and once drew residents of the South and Bekaa Valley to swim in its clear blue waters. All that has changed since it is a buildup of mining and fecal matter has contaminated 37% of the water, turning it into a brownish muck no longer viable for swimming or watering crops. More than 100 sheep and goats were found dead on a grazing ground in northeast Lebanon, according to the National News Agency. The report said about 120 of the livestock were discovered dead in the area of Wadi al-Khanzir outside the town of Al-Qa near the Syrian border. Authorities swiftly headed to the area to inspect the site as samples are being taken to determine the reasons behind the deaths. But the health ministry later said in a statement that it has opened an investigation into the incident, putting the number of dead livestock at 150. In a similar incident, Environment Minister Mohammed Mashnou ordered an investigation after a large number of fish were found dead at Karaoun Lake in East Lebanon earlier this week. The Karaoun Lake is an artificial lake formed by a dam on the Litani River in the Bekaa. The reservoir is used for hydropower generation, domestic water supply and irrigation. And the discovery of the fish comes a day after the Litani River's blue water turned into a brownish muck due to the ongoing pollution from sand quarries and villages using it as a dump. Tests conducted by the South Lebanon Water Authority indicated that 37% of the river's water is polluted. And earlier this month, Health Ministry inspectors ordered the closure of a poultry farm in South Lebanon after they discovered that many of the chickens were dead or burnt. More world news when we return. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the English news here on Future Television. U.S. President Barack Obama is responding to critics who charged he has not done enough to show support for law enforcement officers after 2 years of protests against incidents of violence by police against the black community. Obama faced several pointed questions during a town hall broadcast on the ABC television network, exploring the emotionally charged issues surrounding policing and racial discrimination in the United States. The divide between police and the black community was brought into stark focus last week when a man angry about the killings by police of 2 black men in Louisiana and Minnesota shot and killed 5 police officers in Dallas at a demonstration.
I'm concerned that police officers across the country, they know you support law enforcement, of course, but do they really in their heart feel like you're doing everything you can to protect their lives? Yesterday, you had meetings at the White House, and afterwards you said the tension between the police and between black America is only going to get worse. Words matter. Your words matter much more than mine.
I have been unequivocal in condemning any rhetoric directed at police officers. So I think, Lieutenant Governor, you'd have to find any message that did not include a very strong support for law enforcement in all my utterances dating back to Ferguson, because I rely on law enforcement to protect me and my family just like everybody else does. So I appreciate the sentiment. I think it's already being expressed, but I'll be happy to send it to you in case you missed it. Lieutenant Governor, what I have said is that the data, and this is not just stuff I make up, I'm aware that my words matter deeply here. The data shows that there are disparities in terms of how persons of color and whites are treated in the aggregate. That doesn't mean in any individual case there's discrimination. It just means that across a lot of different situations there are discrepancies.
International Managing Fund head Christine Lagarde says the Brexit exit from the European Union could inspire a new focus by European leaders. The positive person inside herself, she says, while regretting, of course, the decision that was made by the British people, believes that it could be a catalyst for a reawakening, a momentum, a focus on the real issues that will make a difference in people's lives. She said this during an event at the Center for Global Development in Washington. Lagarde also said she was encouraged to see European authorities working to adopt a pan-European response to the issue of refugees. The IMF had said previous efforts by European leaders to address migrants had been piecemeal and limited. The European Commission proposed to harmonize further EU asylum rules, partly to ensure that people waiting for refugee status do not cross Europe's internal borders in ways that have disrupted its passport-free zone. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. France declares 3 days of national mourning after at least 84 people killed when a driver in a truck plowed through the busy street in Nice after Bastille Day celebrations. Neighbors of the 31-year-old Tunisian Frenchman suspected to have killed the people in Nice describe him as a loner with no visible religious affiliation. And in Lebanon, the cabinet agrees to form a ministerial committee to address the environmental disaster afflicting the Litani River that is threatening surrounding residents and their livelihoods. Those are your Friday headlines live on Future Television. Catch us again tomorrow for all the latest. Have a good night and be safe.